we're going to have a lot of innovation coming from the younger generation, given those opportunities are now available.
And they're already thinking of what to research next.
There's a lot of resource potential utilization on the moon, things like helium that you can get off the moon that is really rare here on Earth to help enable and improve the human experience on Earth as well.
Wells says he hopes the recognition from NASA will inspire high school students to begin to think about space technology as a career option. Because with hard work and determination, a project that began in a garage during a pandemic could someday land on the moon.
Hearing terminology like level 1, 2, and 3 evacuations, that's somewhat of a foreign term on this side of the state.
We're waiting on engine 5-9.
The ability for us to stop all forest fires is just not realistic.
Our history isn't easy to tell because so many tried so hard to erase us, calling us Muckleshoot for the place we moved to, instead of the Duwamish and Upper Puyallup villages we left behind. They tried to kill the Indian in us, forbid us from speaking our language, but we held strong to our identity, to our treaty rights. Our Seattle heritage runs deep. We are Muckleshoot.
He's Look at where we live. All these stories, all this talent and potential, the possibilities that lie ahead. We see what might be and work each day to make it happen by keeping it local. Neighbors investing in neighbors, building on the positive, and bringing all of us a little closer together. WSECU, the credit union working to create a better Washington for all.
Watch all of TVW's award-winning shows on your time at tvw.org.
Speaker has opened the roll call machine. The bill is declared passed.
The title of the bill will be the title of the act.
Everybody ready? Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We know we have another shooting in Kansas City, terrible incident. fatalities, half of 23 people apparently injured, half of whom were children. May have involved a personal dispute, we don't know. All we know is it's another tragedy involving guns. And just a comment, it seems that sometimes we seem to focus on gun violence only when it involves a Super Bowl championship or a mass shooting. I just want to say that gun violence is a pathogen, a pathology, a crisis in the quiet confines of our homes, not just in mass shootings. And I think it's important to note that. Almost half of the gun violence of deaths are caused by death due to suicide with guns. Your chance of having a suicide in your home go up dramatically if there's a gun in your home. We have many, many occasions when we find one of our citizens deceased in a grocery store parking lot because of what may have been an argument years ago is now as a fatal gunshot. This is a problem that is much broader than just mass shootings or shootings around particular incidents. That's why I hope the legislature will continue their work this year, building on some of the common sense gun violence measures that we have taken in the past. We have several bills that are still under consideration in that regard. A bill requiring a firearm dealer's code of conduct, one involving restricting open carry in certain areas, including libraries, zoos, and public transit facilities, a law ensuring that our firearm buyback programs, in fact, are fully funded. These things make sense. They're common sense. They're the right thing to do. We should consider them not just when there are shootings in famous events or mass shootings, but because of the individual lives they're taking in many, many ways across the state of Washington. So I want to encourage the legislators to continue to work to get those bills to my desk. Yesterday, or day before yesterday, had a great meeting with Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Joined me on the I-5 corridor to build on our momentum to build the I-5 bridge across the Columbia River. This bridge was built during the Woodrow Wilson administration on wooden pilings that are still supporting this bridge, wooden pilings from the Wilson administration. It is past time we rebuild this bridge, and I am extremely grateful of the Biden administration's attention to this effort, manifested not just by the Secretary's actually second visit to the bridge, but by the tremendous investment the federal government has made of $600 million, which is an incredible amount, which is a very significant portion of the entire pool of money that was available nationwide, has now been dedicated under this particular pool of federal money to the I-5 bridge. It is a huge boost in confidence that we will be able to turn to construction. Now we are making requests for further funds from the federal government under 2 additional sources or pools of money. But the fact that the administration has dedicated such a significant amount is really a good sign for us of eventually being able to complete this bridge. You can't overstate how important it is to our state and to the nation's commerce. It is one of our frustrations that unfortunately the Republicans killed this when we could have done this 10 years ago. That bridge might have been partway through construction by now. But now we have a second shot. And I want to really thank the administration and Secretary Buttigieg for their attention to this project. You know, the Secretary gets out there and he goes and we actually went and looked at how they run the lift situation. Goes up, 100, 130 feet. They have like 600 tons of cement up there suspended on wooden pilings at this point. And for the Secretary to see the mechanism associated with that of 107 years old, he gets it, why we have to get this project done. So really good news across the Columbia River. Some legislative updates. I want to thank Senator Wynn for his leadership and others who are working on linking our market or our Climate Commitment Act that is helping fight climate change and building jobs across the state of Washington and helping people in so many different ways. By the way, it's been a particular joy in the last several weeks. I've been able to see the kind of investment this bill is putting into place. Talking to a woman who had her utility bills slashed because we got insulation for her home. Talked to a woman in Toppenish who got solar panels for her roof, and agricultural workers almost eliminated your utility bill. It's been a real joy to see the good things that are happening across the state of Washington. I was in Vancouver the other day to see one of our first electric vehicle charging stations that's going to go in at the parking lot of a Mexican restaurant. We're starting to see the fruits of this bill, and it has been a particular joy to see that across our state. This linkage will make the bill even more efficient, and I look forward to its passage. I want to thank Representative Dolio's bill to limit future methane gas use. This is giving a pathway for a large utility to move to its aspirations to have cleaner energy sources for our consumers, and while at the same time maintaining reliability of our system. The bill is well crafted and it's moving. I'm very happy about that. So we'll look forward to the passage of that bill. We are working our transit-oriented development bill. We know we're making progress building housing for Washingtonians, but we continue to need more places to build that housing. And certainly makes sense to do that in areas that are transit-oriented locations. The bill beat the cutoff. I'll look forward to the Senate moving the bill. We can't build housing without a place to build it. And we don't have any more acres in the state of Washington. So we have to find additional places to build housing. This is a very important bill to get this job done. We have several public safety bills, including our fentanyl education for young people bill, Pearson's bill. I'm glad that moving forward. The speed camera bill to address out-of-control traffic fatalities. You know, we've had over 800 fatalities last year. This is a common sense bill. It'll build on existing technology. We're glad that it's moving. I was not the only one disappointed that the 05 alcohol limit bill did not pass, but that continues to make progress. People are continuing to increasingly understand the lethality of impaired driving. That'll be a subject for future years. I hope that these bills will continue. Some budget items. I've been meeting with para-educators around the state recently, and they are some of the most inspiring people in education because they have such one-on-one contact with students. And when you talk to the certified teachers, they'll tell you how important para-educators are, particularly for special education students, but not just special education students. And I'm very hopeful the legislature will see fit to get them a pay raise that I have put into my budget. I think it's an important point. We need more funds for fentanyl treatment. We need more funds for housing to continuing the progress we've made, particularly the right-of-way initiative. We've had some really significant progress along our right-of-ways. If you drive from I-5 corridor like I do frequently, you'll see there's been a very significant change on our roadways. Most of the visible homeless encampments have been removed in I-5 from Olympia to Everett. There's one on 45th and 50th is in the process of being relocated to get those people into housing. But we need to continue that, and we need some additional funds to complete that job. I want to mention something coming back to housing. There is a bill that I think is an important one. It's Bill 2474. This bill would really encourage local leaders to step up to the plate and show some leadership to site housing. This has been a problem. Most recently in Kenmore, we had a site for over 100 housing units ready, set to go, been well worked, financing in place, consistent with local zoning, but local leaders showed more fecklessness than leadership and killed the project. We cannot solve the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis in this state without local leadership. In that case, we did not have it. Now, fortunately, that site will be able to, in some sense, move over to Redmond, where we did have some leadership. But we can't allow NIMBYism to lock us into a homeless crisis. And NIMBYism is a pathology when it comes to homelessness. So this bill would essentially say that if we're not going to have some local leadership, we won't have state dollars awarded for those projects to those cities that have failed to show leadership in this regard. Now, I understand that any change involves concern, questions, and that any change in any neighborhood can invoke controversy. And when I've talked to some local leaders about that, they've said, well, people get upset. Well, you know, people are upset about homelessness too. I talked to one leader who said, well, gee, I had 5% of my city was upset about it. Well, they need to have confidence that the 95% who want a solution to homelessness are going to back these leaders up. They need to have a little more confidence in their electorate. They have to recognize that when questions are asked about these projects, that answers are given, but that people have confidence that when we build these housing systems, when we build drug treatment, when we build tiny home villages, they become part of the neighborhood. And as a governor, I can tell you I've seen this movie over and over again, where someone proposes a solution to homelessness, to have housing. Someone proposes a treatment center for a drug problem. And some folks raise questions about that. They say, no, send it somewhere else, not in my backyard, not in my neighborhood. We're special, we're different. And then we get it through, and 6 months later, there's peace in the valley. The drug treatment works, the housing comes in, it's not a problem. Crime does not skyrocket, kids go to school, people have potlucks. It works. If you can just get over that first time of controversy. So we need our local leaders to step up to the plate to help on a statewide solution to a statewide problem, which is homelessness. And I hope this bill will give us one more tool to encourage that and inspire local leaders. With that, happy to stand for your questions. Last time we went this way, this time let's go this way.
Governor, what is your reaction to the bill that is now calling for you to declare a ferry procurement emergency so that boats can be built more quickly?
Well, we do want to build boats more quickly in every way that we can. There's nothing that I'm aware of that would be an impediment currently under the existing statutory framework. It's just a matter of getting people to get their bids in. So I'm not sure exactly what that proposal is. It has not reached me yet. I'm alert to any suggestions on how to do that, so I will welcome any suggestions. But I'm unaware of any real statutory impediment. It's just a matter of getting the bids in at this point. And the reason I say that is, as you know, we have opened up the bidding process to out-of-state bidders. So that is open now to out-of-state bidders. It's just a matter of getting the bids in. We've also accelerated it by allowing and encouraging bidders to bid for multiple boats. So you maybe do 2 boats at the same time. So any suggestions I'll be welcome to listen to. I haven't heard of any statutory impediment at the moment.
So to help you out there, follow that up a little bit. Last time you, in January, had one of these conversations, you said that we must do everything possible to solve the ferry crisis.
Yes.
So the sponsors of the bill are saying that if we could just use the diesel boats, build those that would be converted to hydroelectric later, you can have boats within 2 years now instead of waiting 4 to 5 years.
We don't believe that's true. We don't believe there's any time difference between electric or diesel. It's the same. This technology is proven. It's available. We have multiple boats in the water across the world, including a dozen or more in Norway. We have looked at that. Our ferry personnel have told us they do not believe that would expedite the production of the boats. So I don't think that's a viable option for us. Thank you for bringing that subject up.
Governor, at a previous press conference...
By the way, can I just give me just a moment? People are going to love these boats, too. When you're on them, they're so quiet. They're so non-polluting. When I talk to the folks in Norway, the crews in Norway all want to work on the electric boats because there's no vibration. There's no pollution. They go home and they're not tired. It is going to be a really good thing for Washington State. And what I can tell you is we will have electric boats just as fast as we would have diesel boats. So there's not an advantage in that regard. I wish that, pardon?
At a higher cost.
There might be some additional cost, but then we're not buying diesel fuel. So we get cheaper power. So over a lifetime, I don't think that that's an issue.
Governor, at a previous press conference, when discussing the right-of-way program, you cited a group of people in the neighborhood wanted boulders put in because, and you said they didn't want an encampment so close by. And then today you said that the right-of-way project is getting people out of view of the I-5 corridor. How would you say those things and then also say at the same time that the state needs to do away with NIMBYism?
I'm not sure I understand your question. What we've tried to do on the right-of-ways is do two things. Number one, get housing solutions for people, which we have done, and it's been quite successful. Something like 80 or 85% of the people who have accepted housing are still in housing. It's been quite successful. And number two, reduce the visual blight along our freeways. Those are not incompatible. They're consistent. We've got housing for folks. We didn't just kick them off the shoulder and then have them move into the park, on the next camp. That's not a solution. The whack-a-mole solution has not really worked very well. We've actually got shelter and housing for folks. At the same time now, we've eliminated the visual blight that a lot of frankly, the refuge and the squalor that people have been living in along our freeways, which is a good thing. And we have used, and I know some people have criticized us for this, mechanisms so those do not become reestablished. But I do believe that's the right thing to do, certainly from a hygiene perspective, so we don't get the hygiene and traffic safety issues right next to people driving 60 miles an hour. But also, it's just not good for our state to have that visual impact on our communities. People don't like it. So I think this is one of those happy circumstances where both we answer to compassion for people who are unhoused and for having a state that looks like the Evergreen State in the way we want. I don't think those are inconsistent.
So you talk about the visual aspect and people not liking that. Would you say that's similar to somebody not wanting an encampment in their backyard and rather having it out of sight and out of mind?
Well, there's a difference between saying I'm trying to articulate this. There's a difference between saying, don't put it in my neighborhood, but do solve the problem. That's what we're doing. We're solving the problem. We're getting housing for these people. I don't consider the State of Washington Department of Transportation a NIMBY, right? They're not just kicking people down to Idaho or Oregon. They're actually providing housing. So we're providing a solution to people. Now, it's not on the wrong place, which is on right next to people going 60 miles an hour. That's the wrong place to give people housing. It's in the right place in other housing solutions. So no, I don't think DOT is guilty of being an NIMBY whatsoever. I think they're guilty of trying to solve a problem, which they're doing. And they're doing it because they're also providing some supportive services for people. A lot of these people have drug issues. A lot of them have mental health challenges. And we're providing those supportive services so they succeed in staying in housing. That's that figure that has been pretty optimistic of how many people we've got to stay in housing as well. Jerry.
So your administration has spent a lot of time promoting the sale of electric vehicles. There's a strategy that was developed this last year. One of the elements that seemed pretty important in that plan was allowing direct sales of electric vehicles to consumers. Tesla can do it, but state law prevents anyone else. An effort to open the market up was derailed by Democratic lawmakers and maybe some outside groups. I wondered why you think the Democrats did not endorse that idea, where and maybe you're still working on it in the final weeks to try to get that law changed so other dealers could direct sale to consumers.
Well, I was disappointed by that result. I do think giving consumers alternate methods of getting a vehicle is a healthy thing for the consumers and ultimately a healthy situation for the industry as well. Look, everybody knows why this bill hasn't advanced. Some business folks want to have a monopoly, a stranglehold on the mechanism of selling cars in our state. They don't like competition. They don't like the fact that a direct dealer might be able to sell a car at a lesser price than an auto dealer who has a lot, in a city in the state of Washington. They don't want competition. I guess I understand that, but we need to answer to the needs of the consumers, not just particular business people. And so I'm disappointed this bill is not advanced. I hope it will continue in future years. There was an effort by the auto dealers to do some things that would help them, but it certainly was not going to advance or get my signature unless it also opened up this conduit for Washingtonians to get electric vehicles at a lesser price. There's just no sense for that. We ought to open up this market for people to get the best deal they can. And in the internet age, to say that you have to drive to somebody's dealer to get the car when you can get it online, delivered, in a prompt way, is just nuts. So this is a case of special interests overwhelming the public interest, and I'm disappointed in it. So I know that discussion will continue.
The rent stabilization bill passed out of the House at the buzzer on Tuesday faces an uncertain fate in the Senate, I think it's safe to say. Is that something you support? Will you get involved to try to continue that through? Would you sign a bill that would limit it right now with the latest proposal was 7% every year? Is that a good policy?
So I haven't seen the specific bill. Generally, I think what I've said is what I continue to say, which I think some approach to reduce the rate of change, I think, is reasonable. I don't know if that's the right number or the right approach, so I've got to look at the specifics. But in general, I think some marginal way to restrain the rate of change is not something we should rule out. But I'll need to look at the specifics of the bill. We got some cameras there. Anything from the cameras? Or should we keep moving here?
Go ahead, please.
I was going to ask about rent stabilization, but since you just talked about that, are there any pieces of legislation that are still moving forward that you're particularly concerned about? I'm just wondering, I know you talked a little bit about some legislation that didn't move forward that you're disappointed with, but is there anything moving forward that you're keeping a particularly close eye on that you haven't mentioned, or that you're worried?
Thank you. I guess one thing I would pick out is the bill that would allow utilities to continue their efforts to get consumers non-methane polluting gas in the future years, and to allow them, of course, to be able to structure that, both from a climate perspective and for a consumer price perspective. And I'm very committed to getting that bill through. It's a very well-worked bill. It's passed one of the chambers now, I think. Am I right on this? Yes, it's passed one of the chambers, and there's no reason it should not pursue it. It's very important that as Washington has committed itself to reducing our climate change gases, that it actually provides a way for the utilities to actually follow that goal. And this is imperative to have this tool for the utilities to be able to accomplish that goal to meet our climate change gas reduction program. And this is going a little astray, but the climate change data that we're now getting is significantly worse than it was when we passed the Climate Commitment Act. And I hate to say that, but it's true. The rate of the melt in Greenland, the rate of the potential collapse of the Antarctic ice sheets, the hottest month, I think, maybe in human history was last month. The devastation in rain and fire and flood and sea level rise is an unbelievable rate. And so we have to continue our commitment to this, and this is one of the important bills to do that.
I wanted to follow up on climate. Your three priority bills coming into this session on climate issues included the oil company transparency legislation, and that's not moving forward. So in your capacity as governor, what options do you have to get at that idea of transparency and conversations about gas prices, particularly as Climate Commitment Act is on the table for voters to repeal?
Well, I think this is like a lot of things. This is the first time this idea was introduced. It'll take some additional sessions of the legislature to continue that discussion. Beyond that, there are not a lot of tools available to the governor. So that's going to be an issue for future legislators.
I also wanted to ask about the oil transparency bill. It sounded like it was a sort of budget impediment to getting that done this year. Were you aware, I guess, going into the short session that it was going to be a heavy lift to impose that mandate?
I'm sorry, did you ask?
Were you aware that going into session that it was going to be a heavy lift, like legislators were saying, given the costs of that bill?
Yes, and it's like a lot of things. It was the first time. One of the things I learned as governor, the first time you introduce an idea is not usually the time you get it over the finish line. There's a socialization. There's looking at the issues. There was an issue about maintaining not crypto, but there was an issue of how we could maintain the security of the information that had to be worked out, that hadn't quite been worked out. So it's not shocking to me that it didn't get through at this point. That's the nature of legislation.
Hi, Governor. I just came to see how many reporters were left covering you, and I wonder if you have any comment on the, decimation of the press corps in Olympia.
Well, you may have heard my presentation on this in the past, but I firmly believe it, that our democracy is suffering multiple threats right now. Now, I know the industry as a whole looks at it as an industrial issue, and it is. The lack and the demise of some of our great enterprises is really sad. But it also is a threat to democracy itself, because when people do not have credible sources of professional people who have some commitment to professional journalism, it just leaves us bereft of information you can put I trust in. And we're seeing that in so many different ways. And it is a real threat to democracy. That's what I can tell you. That's how I feel about it. Everybody's focused on what artificial intelligence can do with fake videos and fake articles and everything else. But we've already lost so much if you don't have a trusted news source to go in the first instance. Don't worry so much about AI. Artificial intelligence, one thing, but natural stupidity is another. And all of us are a little blind if we don't have information at our disposal. So I look at it as a real threat to democracy. I wish I had a solution. I know you've proposed a number of ideas. There's been some tax ideas. But I can tell you I'm very concerned about it. And I wish I had the answer to it. I really do.
Maybe you and Trudy can start a newspaper next year.
Well, I don't know. What would I call it? The Seattle Real Times. I don't know. How's that?
Governor, I want to ask a capital budget related question. The Senate released their proposal today. I believe in yours you set aside around $100 million for the rapid acquisition account to buy emergency housing. The Senate version doesn't do that. Instead, they put around $100 million into the Housing Trust Fund. I'm just curious about your thoughts on that approach, and is there any concern that there won't be funding for that right-of-way project?
Well, what I'd say is any housing is good housing. So that's looking at it on the bright side. But we really do need to continue the progress at the rate we have achieved on our right-of-ways, the dollars that I have suggested, if we're going to continue that rate of progress. And I think it's a very healthy thing for the state of Washington, both for the people who've been exposed to these unhealthy conditions and for the citizenry to not see homelessness encampments as they're driving to work every single morning. It is bad for morale, it's bad for image, it's bad for our image as a state. It's just unhealthy. So I'm encouraging legislators to move forward on that. Now, that was in a capital budget. There could be money in a transportation budget to do the same thing. So we'll wait to see what that chamber does in the transportation budget. But I think it's been a success story, and I think we should keep it rolling. We're not done yet. We've had real progress, but we're not done yet.
Actually, I wanted to follow up on that question, too. Do you have any idea how many more encampments you have planned for the coming months that you want to get cleaned up with that Rights-of-Way Initiative project?
Well, we've done 32, I believe, to date on the I-5 corridor, I think. I'm not sure that includes Camp Hope or not. And I don't have a number, but we're basically out of funds at this point. So unless we get additional right-of-way funds, I don't think there's more to come, unless we get further appropriations at the moment. The most recent one, again, is at 45th and 50th. I was going to go to there yesterday. We're in the process of getting those people housing and cleaning that up as we speak, which frankly has been one of the most frustrating ones to me. It's just not good for people to get off at our largest university, drive off to take their kid to go see a school and see a giant homeless encampment right there. Welcome to the University of Washington. It's been very frustrating to me. So I'm glad we're finally getting that done, but we want to continue progress.
Governor, I'm sure you're aware of the situation at Riverton Park, United Methodist Church in Tukwila. Immigration, obviously, a huge issue in the country right now. Maybe not the subject for lawmakers, but at the federal level, efforts to do anything about the crisis at the southern border have all but stalled outside of apparently impeaching cabinet-level secretaries. I'm just wondering, what role does the state of Washington have, if any, in helping people who are coming over seeking asylum in our country?
Well, we have multiple roles. I'll start with the one that's top of mind for me. We have one role, which is to speak out against the most egregious, partisan, injurious, nakedly political abuses of policy in the history of the U.S. Congress. And that's when Donald Trump said, I don't want you to do anything positive on the border because it might help Joe Biden. Basically what he has said. And the Republicans in the House of Representatives have followed him like lickspittles, doing whatever he says. And they're dancing to his tune. And that has prevented us from getting some measurable progress on the border. And it's a damn shame. It's an outrage. And I'm not the only one who's said this. Republicans have said the same thing. How the hell can somebody running for president of the United States say we have a problem on the border, but he doesn't want them to do anything about it because it might hurt me electorally? How can anybody stand up and say that, which he has? And that's exactly what has happened. So one thing we can do is call him out on it. So that's what I'm doing. That's one thing we can do. The second is that we can try to ameliorate some of the challenges that our communities have had. We have provided some assistance. We have a refugee program. I've asked for, I think it's a total of $8 million this year to provide some relief from folks, including Ukrainian refugees, by the way. People have forgot the Ukrainian refugees that have been so courageous and becoming part of our community. I remember talking to a fellow who's opened a barbershop in Spokane now from Ukraine, and he's been quite successful. There's some good news stories out there, too. But obviously, the refugees are not the only folks we have who aren't housed. We have all kinds of people who've lived here for years that aren't housed as well. So we have to help everybody, if you will, which we're doing appropriately. And then we can hope that we get people in office that will actually do reasonable things on the border. And the proposal that was considered on a bipartisan basis, that was fashioned on a bipartisan basis by one of the most conservative Republican senators there are, who was, by the way, endorsed by Donald Trump, who he now denies, was a meaningful proposal. It would have actually put some caps on the number of folks coming in under certain circumstances. It would boost enforcement significantly. It was a significant bill. This was not some, propaganda piece. So maybe on another day, that'll see the light of day again.
One more thing that I wanted to ask about was Senator Billig this morning talked about the 6 initiatives. 2 of them, the CCA and capital gains, are now off the table. However, sounds like there is appetite to take one, maybe more of them up by the legislature if they find their way to your desk in some form. Is that something that you would consider signing?
Yeah, I would certainly consider passages of some of those. I've not reached any conclusions. I'm waiting for the legislature to show me what their desire are at the moment.
I think we gotta wrap. One last question.
But can you just elaborate when you say you would consider passage? You're talking about the initiatives as written and signed by the voters, or an alternative? And then which ones at this stage would you consider signing if they were brought to you by the legislature?
So I'm going to stick to my first answer, which was would I consider signing some of those if they got to my desk from the legislature, and the answer is yes. I won't elaborate any further because life is too short to have to think of those difficult things. So I'll stick with my first answer.
So that you're not opposed to all the initiatives?
No, obviously there's some I would not sign, obviously. And what I'm saying is there are some that I possibly could sign. And I will wait till the legislators decide which direction they want to go. And then we will all have the answer to that important question. Is that sufficiently obscure? Would you like some assistance obscuring it any further?
Your experience has proven well in obscurity.
All answers will be given in due time. Anything else? Thank you very much. Be well.